Good evening. If everyone could kindly take their seats, we'll get started in just a moment. Thank you so much for being here tonight, and thank you for all being punctual. I want to make sure that we get started on time so we can get everyone on their way in a reasonable amount of time. As we do with everything at Belen, we're going to start with a prayer. And I know many of you have been in the car, you've had commutes. It's sometimes not easy to get all the way out here, especially if you don't live in the area. So I ask you to kindly adopt a prayerful posture. Close your eyes. Bow your heads. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Amen. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen. Our Lady of Belen, pray for us. Thank you so much for coming. Tonight we have a very special speaker, Mr. Ray Estefania, who is going to address the ninth grade parents at this mandatory ninth grade parent meeting. And when his message is over, which is a very important one, Mr. Roque is going to say a few brief words, as well as Mr. Dangulo, our Dean of Men. We're very lucky to have Mr. Ray Estefania here tonight. He's no stranger to Belen. He's worked with the Belen community and the larger community for many, many years. He comes to us with over 20 years of experience in matters of addiction, mental health, and adolescent addiction. And his expertise is invaluable to us, especially during these times in which we live. And we're seeing an uptick in things like vaping and other issues that we have to take very seriously as a community, not just as a school. So it's very important that this message is received by not just the community of teachers here at Belen and the administrators, but also the parents, because you are really the stakeholders in this. You're the most important stakeholders, and your sons are why we're here. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Mr. Ray Estefania, and please listen to his message because it's very important. Mr. Ray Estefania.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here tonight. Thank you for that introduction. I've been coming to Belen for many years. I work with a lot of, can you hear me or do I need a mic? Okay, let me get the mic. I've been coming to Belen for many years, and I've worked in this community for almost 20 now. I've been working with kids who abuse substances for almost 25 years. So I've seen a lot of trends. I've seen a lot of changes. I will tell you that this whole vaping thing, nicotine, you're all hearing it in the news, right? And the deaths we've had recently, and so there's a lot, it's very current. This is really a game changer right now as far as I'm concerned. It's a huge problem. And so I want to talk to you tonight about what's happening. I am not an expert on this, honestly, because the information is so new. We're learning every day more and more about what the effects of e-cigarettes and vaping are going to be on the body and long term, right, for our kids. And so I'm seeing it. It's a huge problem for every community and every school. And I want to tell you that we should all be worried. This is possibly the most sophisticated delivery system of one of the most addictive substances that we know of that I've ever seen. And when I say one of the most addictive substances, I'm talking about nicotine, right? We're going to get into THC and marijuana in this presentation as well. But we had almost eliminated the use of tobacco products among our kids. I mean, it was at an all-time low. It was unusual for me, and I'd say the last 5 or 10 years, to see many kids that were smoking cigarettes and using other tobacco products. I didn't see it very often. That has completely changed. And what we're seeing is kids now who honestly, number one, don't know what they're doing. A lot of kids don't understand that these e-cigarettes have nicotine. They think it's just some flavored thing that they can buy that looks cool, and they don't understand what the addictive potential is. So we're going to get into that a little tonight. I'm going to try to be brief. I am not someone who reads from the PowerPoint, so please, do that for yourself, and I'm going to hopefully go over a lot of information, try to keep it brief, and save some time for questions. So let's talk about just adolescent addiction in general. What we know is the adolescent brain is not fully developed, until probably 24 or 25 years old. So we know that teens are more susceptible to developing addiction. So when you're 14, 15, 16, 17 years old and you begin experimenting with a drug, I don't care what that drug is, you have a very high likelihood of developing some dependency or addiction with it. We know that the adolescent reward system is fully developed probably by about 12 or 13 years old. That executive part of the brain, the part of the brain that looks at consequences and delays gratification and kind of is able to make good, sound decisions and show good judgment, that's the part that's not developed until probably 24 or 25 years old. So adolescents are at greater risk for developing problems with substance use, whether that be alcohol or nicotine or marijuana or anything else. We also know that most substance use disorders begin in adolescence. So we know that most addiction starts when folks are teenagers. If you look at adults who are addicted to substances, the majority of those people became addicted when they were under the age of 25. So the process of addiction, right, starts with experimentation. There are lots of reasons why someone may start experimenting with a substance. For kids, it's sort of the obvious reasons. Peer pressure, it's cool. They experiment anyway. They're teens. They're supposed to experiment with lots of different things. But they go through this process where right now what's happening with vaping is it is so widespread. It's so easy for them to get, and the delivery system, as I said, is so sophisticated that I am seeing kids 14, 15 years old that have only been using a vape or an e-cigarette, sometimes weeks, months, and are already showing signs of addiction. So it's a crisis problem. It's a major problem that is happening in our community. So we sort of go through they try it, they experiment with it, they move on to regular use. They may then develop addiction and move into a process where they really start to experience consequences from it. And we're seeing what some of those are now. So this is just showing sort of when addiction develops for most young people. Again, mostly in that sort of adolescent and young adult years. So what's the problem, right? Why do kids develop addiction so easily? Why are they so susceptible? Well, again, it's because of that vulnerable, immature brain. You all are sort of that executive part of the brain for them as parents. You are the ones that help them make decisions. Kind of, you're the guide. You're the restraint sometimes, the brakes, if you will. Adolescents often don't have that ability, and so they develop problems with addiction very easily. If you think about it, your kids, right? They're all about a lot of times what feels good. You know, what gives them instant gratification? Think of video games. How many of you have kids that like to play video games? How many of you have to pull them away from the video games because once they get started, they can't stop? It's kind of the same thing, and what we're seeing now with the vaping is that tenfold. So dopamine is basically the sort of the pleasure neurotransmitter in the body. There are other neurotransmitters that certainly play a role in the development of addiction. Dopamine is probably the most important one. So anything that you do that feels good releases dopamine in the brain and causes you to kind of receive this signal that says, wow, this is pleasurable, I like this. And when we like something typically, we want to keep experiencing that. We want to keep doing it. Adolescents, teens are even more sort of set up that way. When they like something, they definitely want to repeat that behavior. So look at some of the things that, are affecting the dopamine system. Drugs of abuse, video games, right? Food can be very reinforcing. When we eat, we like what we're eating, it releases dopamine. Sex, cocaine, amphetamines, methamphetamine, all these things affect the dopamine system. Any drug of abuse releases dopamine and causes the person to really want to continue to use that and achieve that feeling. So here are some of the reasons that kids will begin to experiment, right? Curiosity, it's popular, peer pressure. You know, that you ask them why do they keep doing it? Well, they like the feeling it gives them. They like the fact that it's sort of social. They can do it with their peers. They feel a connection when they do it. And many of them, a lot of the ones I talk to sometimes will admit that I'm addicted and I can't stop. The problem, as I said earlier, is a lot of times they don't realize what they're doing. They don't understand the addiction potential. They hear all these, fun flavors, bubble gum, and all these different things. I mean, if you think about it, what the cigarette industry, the tobacco industry was always targeting whom? Young people. It's the same with this new industry, this e-cigarette industry. They are targeting our young people. So some of the more common, Juul is one of the more common devices that you're going to hear about. Anybody ever heard of a Juul? Okay, so it's the one you've been hearing about in the news. It's pretty well known. You ask kids where do they get them, right? This is how they get them. I will tell you that I have kids right now that I'm working with in my practice that have become essentially dealers of vaping products, nicotine products, even marijuana products. You have kids 15, 16, 17 years old in schools, in good schools, in private schools that are becoming little entrepreneurs and are buying these things and selling them to their friends. And it is happening right now, and it's very concerning. It should be to all of us. I will tell you that why were these e-cigarettes developed in the first place? Anybody know? Supposedly to help people stop smoking, right? I'm not sure that's what's really happening. Again, I think the purpose was to help people get off tobacco products. I think that's happening for some adults. What I am finding is that many of those adults they're able to get off the tobacco, but they're not able to get off the nicotine through the e-cigarettes. And I have a lot of clients who are telling me that it was more difficult for them to stop vaping than it was for them to stop smoking. So this will kind of give you some visuals of some of the different products. And they're becoming more and more advanced every week. You'll see all kinds of devices. Some of them now, I've seen them where they look like a pen, right? A writing pen, an ink pen, where you wouldn't even know it was one of these devices. Here's the CEO, or the former CEO of Juul, who I believe stepped down. He was quoted as saying, "Don't vape, don't use Juul." He was warning of the effects. a lot of the cases that we're seeing, I think, Ralph, was it about 30-something now, that 30-some deaths, 33 deaths now. We're going to get into where a lot of those deaths came from. A lot of those, probably the majority of them, were not actually from nicotine. They were from the THC products, and we're about to talk about how a lot of kids are actually moving from using the nicotine e-cigarettes and vaping with nicotine, and then moving on to now using marijuana THC in a vaping form. Just some more information that's pretty current, right? I mean, it's in the news pretty often now. Here are some of the sort of celebrities, the cool people that are seen using vaping products. You know, kids are on social media. They're seeing all these people who are kind of promoting the use. It's attractive to them. It's cool to them. And so this kind of helps to drive some of the interest in these products. So do we know what they're inhaling? Do kids even know what they're inhaling? Most of the time they don't. You ask kids, did you know that there's nicotine in that? A lot of the times they'll say to me, no, I honestly didn't know that. They don't really know what they're putting in their bodies. What they don't realize is that nicotine is, like I said earlier, one of the most addictive substances that we know of. I would put it up there with drugs like heroin and cocaine and methamphetamine and things like that in its potential to cause addiction. Here's some of sort of the marketing tactics. I mean, look at this. It looks like it might be, you know, candy or something. This is how it's being marketed to our kids. So this will give you an idea of what is in a pod of these things. You have nicotine, you have other flavors and things like that. You also have some of the same cancer-causing agents that were in cigarettes. A lot of the kids will tell you, no, this is safe. This doesn't have any of those chemicals that cause cancer or any of that. They don't understand that, yes, it actually does. And then we'll talk in a minute about the THC, because that's a whole other issue. Here's some surveys that'll give you an idea of kind of the extent of it. It's amazing to me because what I'm finding is kids that I would have never expected to be experimenting with these things, they are. It's pretty widespread. I would say that, you know, more than 50% of the kids in high school today have either experimented or are currently experimenting with nicotine products. It is a huge problem. I have kids that come to my practice who are trying to stop, and some are using other drugs. And they will tell me that in some of their schools, they can't even go to the bathroom without being exposed to other kids that are using vaping products while at school. I have a kid who can't leave his class to go to the bathroom because he's so afraid that he'll go in there and see the other kids using that he will end up falling into it and using it himself. So even school, for many of them, is not even a safe place to go anymore to try to be drug-free. So let's talk about this. How many of you knew that you could use marijuana, or essentially the active ingredient in marijuana, which is THC or tetrahydrocannabinol? How many of you knew that you could use that through a vape? How many of you did not know that? How many of you knew that that is probably the main way that kids are using marijuana today? They rarely smoke the plant form anymore. They are doing this. And so you can call, there's lots of different names. You can call it oil, they call it dabs. It is a more potent form, probably the most potent form of using THC that I have seen in my 25 years of working with young people. So marijuana has come a long way. I'm 52 years old. I grew up here in Miami. So, you know, back when I was growing up, people definitely smoked marijuana. The THC that is being used today by young people is almost a different, it's a different drug. It's kind of what we used to think of the difference between cocaine and crack. It is more potent, it is more addictive, it is virtually undetectable. So someone could be in this room right now, maybe in the back somewhere, and could be using a vaping device and using THC through it, and none of us would have any idea that they were doing it because it has virtually no smell. And so that is how the kids are using it and not being detected. So back in the, let's say, the 80s, you know, the late 70s and early 80s, maybe even into the 90s, and even now, marijuana has gotten increasingly more potent over the years. I would say right now the plant form of marijuana is probably 30 or 35% THC. The oil is 90 or 95% THC. So it really is something that we have never seen before. And I have more kids today that are becoming addicted to marijuana than I've seen in probably 10 years. And it's all because of this oil. Here's just some, you've probably seen some of these reports in the news about these devices when they explode, because they do sometimes. I've seen reports where it exploded in someone's pocket. I've seen reports where they were actually had it in their mouth and they were using it and it exploded, like in this case. So the device itself can be dangerous also. Here are some other situations where people were injured, burned, where these devices explode. Now, this is really referring to the deaths we've seen recently. Again, I think we're still learning what the cause of this was. The research I'm seeing is really showing that most of the cases were not nicotine, but were actually THC. Most of those people were using the THC pods, the oil. And most of them were actually counterfeit pods. So they weren't the legitimate ones that you would get in a dispensary or something like that. But you know what? Here's another thing you probably don't know. Most of the kids right here in this town in Miami that are smoking this oil, they are smoking the counterfeit pods. They are not getting the legitimate ones. The real ones are harder to get, they're more expensive. And like anything else, a lot of times people think, well, if you legalize something, that means the black market for it goes away. Well, that's not true. And so the black market with these now is creating the fake pods. And you don't know what other ingredients are in those other than the THC. And so that is what the kids are. I had a kid in my office earlier this week who said to me, yeah, I know I'm smoking the counterfeit pods, but I can't afford the good ones. So even with all the information that he's hearing about the lung disease and the deaths that are happening, you know, he is so dependent and so addicted that he's continuing to use despite that information. So we've had about 800 cases. Most of them, as I said, were THC oil. Here's what I'm finding. We talk about gateway drugs sometimes, right? Sometimes one drug leads to another. We used to say that cigarettes were the gateway to kids using marijuana and then maybe even later on experimenting with other drugs. What I'm finding today, the gateway is vaping nicotine is leading to vaping THC. And many kids are making that jump. Again, availability, acceptance, Their peers are doing it, they think it's cool, and honestly, they don't understand the harm. I sit there and meet with kids and I try to educate them about what it is they're doing, and most of them don't really know what it is they're putting in their bodies. And honestly, most parents don't know either. Most parents don't know. Here's a difference. A healthy lung versus a vaping lung. It's kind of that same lung disease, or I think they call it popcorn lung. Same sort of lung disease you get from smoking cigarettes, although it appears to be happening. You used to see that in people that had been smoking for 20 years or more. Now you're seeing it in, 20-year-old kids, 25-year-old young people who have not been vaping all that long. Some more pics of the lung damage. There's another young man, had serious lung disease. Deaths, recent deaths, kids in the hospital. So here are some other devices. A lot of times you won't be able to tell. Sometimes you'll see them, they look like a little USB. And you'll think there's like a USB drive. Or like I said before, it's a pen. Looks just like an ink pen. And you won't know what the device is and that it's really an e-cigarette. So, the oil right now is a big concern to me. As I said earlier, we had almost eliminated nicotine and tobacco products from young people. We're seeing a huge resurgence of that. The numbers are going back up again. I think over the next couple of years, you're going to see lots of kids that are beginning to use and become addicted to nicotine again. What worries me in my work is also this oil, possibly really that's my bigger concern, because it is so addictive compared to the marijuana of 20 or 25 years ago that I'm finding kids that start experimenting with this and develop addiction very quickly. And again, because it's so easy to use, because it's relatively inexpensive, because the delivery mechanism is so sophisticated, they are becoming addicted very easily. I have kids that take their vape to school, and I'm talking private school, folks. Schools that if I mention the names, you would know them. I have kids that are not only taking their nicotine vapes to school, but they're taking the oil to school, and they are getting high in school. They are using in the bathrooms, they are using wherever they can, and again, it's very difficult to detect. And so the problem becomes, back when I was growing up, even just a few years ago, if you wanted to smoke marijuana, you couldn't just light up in school. Why not? Someone would detect you, right? The smell would give you, you couldn't just light up in your room when your parents were downstairs because they would smell it. Now they can be in their room hitting this thing, this vaping device, and you will have no idea. And so the accessibility, how easy it is to use. I no longer have kids that smoke marijuana a few times a week. I have kids that smoke marijuana several times a day, and they're using this device to do it. The levels that I'm finding when I test kids, when I send them to the lab because I monitor their use, the levels that I'm finding are off the charts, higher levels than I've seen in forever. And it's all because of this more potent form of marijuana. Anytime you increase the potency of a drug, what do you increase? You also increase its potential to cause addiction. So couple this more addictive substance with a very sophisticated delivery system with an adolescent brain, and you have a recipe for disaster. Here are some of the common methods that we see, kids using marijuana. Some of them we will recognize, right? Sort of joints and pipes and bongs, but now we're dealing with these on the bottom. Edibles, the oil, the dab pens, the dabbing. That dabbing is like it almost looks like a tar type of material that they actually heat up. And they can also put it in these same devices, vaporize it, heat it up, and they can inhale the THC that way. These are all extremely potent ways of using marijuana. I had like a 10-year-old about a year ago, 10-year-old, that his brother was a college student in Colorado. And he came home for one of the breaks, and he brought a bag of edibles. It looked like candy. And he left it in his room on the dresser. And the 10-year-old, being so excited that his brother was home, went into his room when he wasn't there, looking for him, and saw the bag of candy sitting on the dresser. He ate almost the whole bag. And he ended up at Miami Children's Hospital. He was there for almost 5 days. He was completely out of his mind, in a psychotic state. You were supposed to eat 1 or maybe 2 of the edibles to get high. He didn't know what he was eating, and he ate almost the entire bag. So I just, it's just the potency of this stuff is like nothing we've ever seen before. And this is what our kids are doing. Again, some of those different, so if you think about it, the dabbing is sort of similar to maybe when some of us were growing up when people would use hash, which was a very concentrated form of marijuana. Well, this is even more concentrated than that. This was our Surgeon General not long ago. This was the statement that he put out. Really, what we're seeing, what I'm seeing, emergency visits, typically because someone has ingested so much THC that they have become psychotic. I'm seeing it a lot in young adults. There is a lot of research being done right now that is showing that there may be a link between the use of heavy, heavy doses of THC and psychotic disorders. About 50% of the young people that develop a psychotic disorder as a result of using THC, about 50% of those are going to resolve and are actually, so we're going to call that a substance-induced psychosis. As long as they stop using, they seem to come back to baseline. About another 50% of those are going to move on and develop a true psychotic disorder like a schizophrenia. We don't know, the verdict is really not out yet. We don't know if the marijuana is causing that, or if the marijuana is just bringing out a predisposition to mental illness or to a psychotic disorder that was already there. But either way, there does appear to be a relationship between the use of THC and mental illness. There was a study, you may have heard of this one, maybe about a year or 2 ago. There was actually some evidence that the use of marijuana could also decrease your IQ by about 8 or 10 points. So all of the things that we've always known about marijuana, how it affects your cognitive processes, how it affects memory, how it affects judgment, how it can affect motivation, all of those things are still true, and they're actually, those effects are even more pronounced now with these more potent forms of marijuana and THC that the kids are using. This is some old marketing from way back when. Remember when, well, most of us are not even that old, but remember when they didn't think THC was, cigarettes were harmful either. I think nowadays we still have almost 400,000 people a year that die from tobacco-related causes. I think the verdict's out on what this is going to look like 5 or 10 years from now. I don't think it's going to be good with these vaping devices, and I don't think it's going to be good what it's going to do to addiction among our teens and young adults. So what can you do? Well, I mean, you can do what you're doing now, get educated, start understanding what's out there, really get all the information. Know that nobody's immune. No kid is immune from this happening. It is out there. Don't assume that your child is not going to experiment. Many kids are, even kids that I wouldn't think would. You know, I have kids that I work with in my practice, and they are telling me that most of the kids are using these products in one form or another. Now, not all of them are addicted, and not all of them are doing it on a regular basis, but many of them are experimenting, and you know, what we know to be true is that the younger kids experiment, the more addictive the drugs they're experimenting with, the more likely it is they will develop some sort of dependency. So let me go back real quick. So you got to be a role model. I think that's important for all of the, you know, any of the substances. I mean, alcohol is a perfect example of that. And we need to model responsible, healthy behavior. It's okay to have a drink. You're an adult, no problem with that. But if you're modeling a relationship with alcohol that's not healthy, then our kids are seeing that. I think the same thing goes for nicotine and marijuana and everything else. I have a lot of parents who will say to me, Ray, what's the big deal? I smoked weed when I was in college. I smoked weed when I was a teenager. Look, I'm okay. Right? I hear that a lot. And what I say to those parents is, well, that may be true, and you turned out okay, but that doesn't mean your child will. And the drugs that your child is being exposed to today, the things like the oil that we're talking about today, that was not the case when we were growing up. Things are different. Social media has changed a lot of what kids are exposed to, and the pressure that they feel to fit in and to be accepted. So things are very different today than they were when I was growing up or when you were growing up. So I don't think it's safe to assume that just because you may have done it, that means your child's going to be okay. So be a role model. Have rules, have clear expectations. Make it clear to them that it's not okay. I actually have parents. I shouldn't be shocked, but sometimes I still do get shocked. I have parents that will actually go buy the nicotine e-cigarettes for their kids. They're not old enough to buy them themselves, and they will actually go buy them for their 16 or 17-year-old son or daughter because they don't understand and they don't want them getting in trouble trying to get them themselves. So like all the substances, I think it's important to have the conversation, have it early, make sure that they understand what your position is on it, how you feel about it, whether it's okay with you or not, and make it very clear that it's not okay. Because kids, you know, I mean, you know as well as I do, I have kids too. I have one that's 25 now, so I've raised her up, and I mean, I know that if we would give her any wiggle room, she would find it. So we were always very clear. Now that doesn't mean she never did anything. I know she drank alcohol on occasion in high school. I think she probably did experiment with marijuana here and there. I don't think she does it today. But I will tell you one thing, I didn't make it easy for her. I did not make it easy for her. So every time she walked in the door, up until she was probably a freshman in college, I was up when she walked through the door because I wanted to look at her, see her, maybe even give her a hug and smell her too. It was important. That was how I could, you know, really understand what was going on. So, You know, your kids need to understand the consequences. They need to know where you stand. They will test the boundaries. They are supposed to experiment. We can't expect them not to experiment. We have to expect them, they're going to try things. They're kids. But we also have to be there to make sure they don't go too far the wrong direction. And what I'm seeing right now, I think what I said in the beginning, I think this is a game changer. I think the fight that I fight every day to prevent kids from becoming addicted and to help those kids that do become addicted, my job has gotten much more difficult in the last couple of years because of what we're talking about tonight. It's really an epidemic, and we should all be very concerned. So, we have to give them choices. We have to let them experiment and understand that sometimes they're going to make bad choices. We also have to be able to sit down and educate ourselves and educate them and help them understand what it is they're doing. I will say this, that all the news that's been out in the past few months about all these deaths has impacted kids. They have come to me, they have said to me, wow, I didn't realize how dangerous this was. I didn't understand that you could die from some of this stuff. So it is impacting them. Is it going to be enough to change behavior on a larger scale? I don't know. I suspect not, because I think this will go away and it'll sort of fade, and it won't be the topic of conversation and on the news every other night, and they will forget. And we need to be there to remind them. And so what I'd like to leave you with is really just what I tell parents when it comes to any drug. Don't ever assume it can't happen to you. Don't ever think that your child is smarter and won't fall into it, because I see really smart kids that also make very poor decisions. And just be a snoop. Look through their stuff. Check their phones. Get on their, they don't even do Facebook anymore. Now they have Snapchat and all these other things that are they're very hard to keep tabs on. But, you should be, they always say, well, you know what? They hate it because you're snooping. And I used to tell my daughter, yeah, that's my job, right? Is to make sure that I keep you safe. And my job is to find out as much as I can so that I can help you make good decisions. So educate yourself. Talk to your kids. If you have younger children, I know you're parents of 9th graders, but if you have 6th graders at home, 4th graders, 5th graders, I don't believe it's ever too early to start having a conversation, to educate them, to really help them understand how dangerous these things are. You are still the #1 influence in your child's life. All the research shows that the kids who choose not to experiment with substances, the #1 reason that they don't is they don't want to disappoint you. And so you have to be very clear about what your expectations are. And if you're, alcohol's a tricky one, because a lot of kids will experiment because so many parents are a little wishy-washy about whether their 16 or 17-year-old should be drinking or not. I will tell you that the parents who aren't wishy-washy and who are very clear about it's not okay and I don't allow it, those kids are less likely to drink, believe it or not. Know your child's friends. Know their parents. Never fails to impress me how sometimes I realize that the parents of my daughter's friends didn't always have the same values that we had, especially when it came to alcohol. Set clear limits about vaping, about alcohol and drug use. It is okay to say no use at all. Parenting is not black and white, folks. I know this. There's a lot of gray. But I will tell you that when it comes to alcohol and drugs, it's not gray. It should be black and white. Your job, I believe, as a parent is to delay their use as long as you can, because what we know is the longer we can delay it, the longer that brain has to fully develop and mature, the less likely it is they will have a problem. If you can get them to college without them experimenting with alcohol and drugs, or with minimal experimentation, then their risk goes way down. Have consequences for violations and enforce those consequences. And if you're not sure, ask. Call someone like myself. Talk to your counselor. Talk to Mr. Ledesma. Talk to Terry Gutierrez. Go to someone in your church. Ask for what's appropriate. How should I handle this? Because it's a lot easier to prevent an addiction than it is to treat one once it's already gotten started. Be a role model, and if you discover a problem, confront it. I think that last one is really important. A lot of parents make the mistake of thinking, well, this is kind of normal teenage stuff. They're going to do this stuff. It'll work itself out. I'm just going to, I'm not going to overreact to it. And what they don't realize is these things usually don't just solve themselves, especially when we're talking about addictive substances. It's a slippery slope to think that it's just going to kind of resolve on its own. So my suggestion to you is the first time you discover that your child is drinking, using, experimenting with alcohol, marijuana, these vaping devices, sit down, confront it, hit it head on, have the conversation, make it clear what your expectation is moving forward, and then have some sort of consequences if they continue to do it. And if you've continued to try to deal with it on your own and they are still doing it, then you may need some professional help. I'd like to see if we have any questions. I know that's a lot of information. Yes? Does anybody know? The jewels, I believe, are about, I want to say $20, $40. So 40. So the marijuana, I can tell you, the counterfeit pods, I'm being told, are about $40 or $50 for the THC, the counterfeit ones. The real ones, the true THC pods, are running about $80. Now that could last a kid a month if he's just kind of doing it every once in a while. I had a kid in my office a couple of weeks ago that was going through one of those THC pods in 3 days. But he was smoking almost every waking moment of his day, all day, from the moment he woke up to the moment he went to bed. Yes? Say that again, I couldn't hear you. Yes, so my understanding, and I think there's still a lot of information coming out, is that the inside of their lungs, right, are being coated by some sort of a chemical that's making breathe, so they're almost suffocating to death. Correct. I mean, the information that I've heard is that the majority of those cases involve the fake THC pods. Yes. Excuse me? They don't know. They have no clue. Yes, sir. You're welcome. Yes. Well, yeah, so the question is there any technology, any device, or anything that's available over the counter that you as parents could buy that would clue you into to the fact that they were using? Listen, there's good old parent detective work. But you know, you can drug test your kids. So if you're concerned, I would say you can drug test them. A lot of schools nowadays have random drug testing as just part of their policy and what they do. But you as a parent can drug test them. You can go to Walgreens or CVS and you could buy a drug test that would be multi-panel. It would test for THC. It would test for other drugs. You could test for nicotine as well. So if you're unsure, that is one way that you could find out. Other questions? Yes, sir. That may be true. Maybe there's some entrepreneurs in the room that may want to try to. No, you're right. You're absolutely right. I don't know if that technology exists right now. That's correct. That's right. That's right. That's right. I think we have time for maybe a couple more, and then we have to wrap it up. How about right here? What's that? I am, actually. Yeah. I'm not sure what grades I'm going to be do you? I think I'm going to be talking to maybe ninth and 10th in like a week or two. Yes. Back there I saw a hand up. Yes. Are you talking about with the nicotine or the THC or both? So the nicotine's a little harder because it doesn't. It's sort of the same if someone was smoking cigarettes. You probably wouldn't know it unless you could smell it on them. And with this stuff, you really can't smell it. So it's very hard to sort of look for behavioral signs. I'd say the most common behavioral sign is they are craving nicotine. So they will sort of show some of that. They'll be asking for money. They'll be maybe desperate at times. They might show some irritability. They might sort of have some mood swings, that sort of thing. With the marijuana or the THC, it's a little easier to tell. They will behaviorally maybe start acting out. There may be some of that irritability too. They might become more secretive. They might be lethargic, kind of unmotivated. You might notice that they have red eyes or glassy eyes. They might look sedated at times. I've even seen kids that are so high they'll slur their words. They won't even sort of be able to put a sentence together. So with the THC, especially with the oils, because they're so high when they use this stuff, that it might be easier for you to detect. Anybody else before we wrap it up? Yes, sir. Yeah, I mean, listen, there are still ways for them to kind of deceive drug tests, but you never want to tell them you're going to do it, because then they'll have some opportunity to take something or do water. They may try to drink a lot of water to dilute their urine. Sometimes that works. There are things that they can buy on the internet that show some ability to mask some of these things, but if you don't let them know. You observe them when they do it. And then if you do it randomly and you do it sort of regularly, if you have a concern, it becomes very hard for them to sort of beat you on that. I know schools that are doing it. I know schools that are, I'll give you an example, using hair testing. And so you know what the kids do? They shave their head. So there is a school not far from here where there's a lot of bald kids. That should be a tip-off to the administration that something is wrong. There was a time where the kids, and I think there may be some truth to this, where you could bleach your hair and that would help. So there was a while where there was just like, you walk on the campus, there's a whole lot of kids with bleached hair. It was pretty interesting. So yes, they will try all kinds of different ways to deceive the drug test, but usually if you don't give them notice, you will get an accurate result. Yes, sir. That's right. Correct. Correct. That's right. Just keeping a pulse on what's going on with your kid. Do we have time for more questions? Or okay, how about right here? No, you can test for nicotine as well. It's pretty quick because it's a stimulant. It leaves the body pretty quickly. I want to say detection time on nicotine is probably not more than about a few days. You might want to check that, look on the internet, because I'm not 100% on that. But stimulants tend to leave the body very quickly. Marijuana will hang around for a month or 6 weeks. I am seeing kids that 8 weeks later, 10 weeks later, are still positive for THC because we're seeing such high levels with this oil that they're doing. Yes. Yes, sir. Yep. I am fully in support of everything you just said. Yes. Excuse me? I believe they do, yes. Yes. Any other questions, folks? Yes, ma'am. You know, I don't know. I think the verdict's out on that. I'm not sure. You know, I think for a long time, if you remember, we didn't really understand the effects of secondhand smoke of tobacco use. So I think we're going to learn a lot over the next several years. I can't answer that. I don't know. You know, if you've ever seen someone use one of these things as they're using it, you know, they leave sort of like a cloud, it sort of dissipates pretty quickly, but it's in the air. So I'm assuming that if you're in the close vicinity and you know, or you live with this person and they're doing this around you all the time, I've got to think that there's got to be some secondhand impact to you, but I don't know that for certain. Any other questions or comments? I can't see necessarily all, yes. Yeah. So thank you, and I know it's a lot, and like Mr. Ledesma said, the landscape is changing so quickly. I mean, like from month to month, there's like new things and new devices, and it's kind of hard to keep up with. So I think sort of the same kind of basic advice that I've always given parents still applies, which is what we talked about tonight. You know, don't assume this won't happen to your kid. Don't assume this is a phase that will just resolve itself. Talk to them, educate yourself, right? You know, they shouldn't have privacy when it comes to this stuff. You should be checking their social media. You are going to learn what they are doing through, I mean, they have so many ways to communicate now that we just have to really be vigilant. We have to be vigilant and really make sure that we understand what they're doing, who they're doing it with, where they're going, you know, because it's dangerous. It's dangerous not to. And again, this stuff is just becoming more and more sophisticated, more and more available to them, and we've got to fight it with everything we have. Because I'm afraid if we don't, we're going to just have a whole new wave of kids that are going to be addicted again. And I think we had made some pretty good progress over the last 10 years of really kind of preventing a lot of kids from becoming addicted to a lot of different substances. But this has been the worst situation that I can remember in many, many years. And I'm just seeing many kids starting to use again, kids that 5 years ago I would have thought would never be doing it. Thank you very much, everyone. I'll hang around for a few minutes if there's any other questions.
Thank you very much. Before Mr. Dangulo comes up, I just wanted to also mention to you that, you know, this is one of the reasons why at Belen we focus everything around the family, all our grade level activities around the family, because one of the things that he mentioned was it takes a whole community to bring up a child, not just one set of parents. You need to know the parents in your grade level. You need to know where your son is going. If he's saying, you know, it's ninth grade already, I'm sure they've been going to a party or two already. If they didn't start last year, they're already going. Where are they going? Who is there? Okay? Now, I can tell you that we are doing as much as we can at school to prevent this, but this is one of the times that this is the second presentation. Last year, his associate, Anna, did the presentation. I'm sitting there and I'm a little scared myself because this is not something we can control as a school. In the past, we've been able to, because for example, if somebody smokes weed, we can smell it. But now it's a little cigarette that they have in their pocket, you don't even know, and we don't know what they're smoking in the bathrooms. Now, I do want to tell you that we have separated bathrooms here. You guys are already at high school, but we have a middle school bathroom and a high school bathroom, and one of the reasons we did that was to separate this problem. Because the older kids might be smoking, might be vaping in the bathroom, and we don't want the 6th, 7th, and 8th graders seeing that. So we do ask them to go to the correct bathroom, especially on the 2nd floor. Another thing is, Mr. Degulo may be mentioning this, but I'll take it from him already. A lot of us are walking into the bathroom all the time. The disciplinarians are, I am, just checking. We're going in there, we wash our hands, we look around, because we want to make sure that they don't feel comfortable enough, okay? And the other part of the drug testing he's going to talk about, but I want to make sure that everybody realizes we have to work together. And it's time already for us to stop being friends, because this is a problem, and I'll tell you honestly, with some of our parents, you want to be your son's friend. They have enough friends. That's what Belen's for. The brotherhood is here. We have to be parents. We have to be parents. Ray's been coming and speaking here for many years. This is the first presentation where his focus has been more on parenting than facts about drug use. And the reason is, this is how we're going to stop it. It's not going to be that you have all this information. It's that you are going to be a father and a mother who's going to check on your son and make sure that they're not coming to school with things in their pocket that they shouldn't have, and that they're not going to other friends' house that you don't even know the parents. You don't know the parents, or you don't know if the parents are home. That's ridiculous, and that's what we have to do. So as a community, I think we're going to take control of this, but we're not going to take control of this if you as parents are not parenting. We need your help, okay? You know that Ralph is a school counselor for 9th grade. He is fantastic. He is with your boys all the time, but he can't do it alone. He cannot do it alone. So you need to be on top of them. The other thing is, we have rules in our school, and we're really, the rules focus on kids, on students who are, I'll tell you right now, that if they're selling things, that's a bigger problem for us. Because we understand that vaping is a problem right now, and it is an addiction, and we're going to deal with those students separately. But those who are trying to sell it to others are the ones that we're going to come down hard. And everybody here is going to say, I agree with the school rules 100% until it applies to your son, right? It's normal. I understand. My boys came through here. I understand that. But you have to understand that sometimes we're making very difficult decisions because of the entire school community. Yes, sir. I'm going to hand it to Mr. Dangulo. He's going to go over some of the rules. I also want to say, I know the handbook is kind of a bit long, but everybody signed saying that they read the handbook, right? I know it's a little bit long, but I would go home, even after Mr. Dangulo gives you an overview of it, of what are the things that we're going to be doing and what the consequences might be. I would go home tonight, open up the resource page, click on student handbook, and look for the rules. Because again, as Ray said, it's an epidemic, and we need to address this. So I'm going to hand it over to Ms. Well, do we have another? Yes. Yes, and he's going to talk about it right now, okay? I'm going to hand it over to Mr. Angulo.
Great, thank you. So anybody scared? Because I am. I mean, this scares the crap out of me. Great questions, Ray, thank you, phenomenal. This is something that I'm trying to learn more about every single day, and unfortunately, a lot of the information that I've learned about this is through the kids. I will tell you, I'm an alum from the school, class of '93. I was very naive. To me, none of this stuff that existed 25 years ago never pertained to me because I was tunnel vision, and this wasn't what I did. I didn't live this world. This is the world I live in today. And I tell the boys all the time, my job is about the what ifs. I live in the what if world. What if this happens? How can I help? How can I, work with you and your parents? And, Mr. Roca said it, Ray said it. This is a team effort. We can't do this alone. You can't do this alone. We want to make sure that together we can get this done so that everybody is safe. One of my biggest takeaways from what Ray said in this presentation was the kids aren't even safe at school anymore. That's scary. It's scary to think that you trust where it is that they're going to a safe place. And I can tell you as an administration, as a school, as a staff, we do everything we can to try to keep these kids as safe as possible. But again, if the message is not being sent and delivered at home, it's hard for us to continue to keep your kids safe or try to keep them safe. So we have to make sure that we complete this night's mandatory meeting by taking this message home and having this conversation with your sons. The 9th grade sons, the 12th grade sons, the 6th grade sons, cover every single basis that you have. I'm taking this home with me. I'm having this conversation with my wife. My kids are 9, 7, and 5. I don't have that conversation yet, but trust me, I'm listening, and I'm learning, and I'm making sure that when the time comes for me, that conversation is going to be had, okay? To answer a couple of the questions, I think, first of all, it says a lot about Belen that we have this presentation, that we realize that this is a problem for us, just like it is for every other school in the country. And we realize it, and we want to make sure that education is where it is, that we want to make sure that this begins. The education that we are giving you to understand what the damages that can happen by our kids doing what they think has no harm to them. So again, I think it says a lot about Belen, it says a lot about the leadership in this school to really just take this right to heart, right to you, and say, we know that this is an issue for us, and we need to address it immediately together, collectively as a team. If a student gets caught with a vape, and again, a lot of this presentation has really evolved with vaping. If a student gets caught with a vape, they will be suspended. If they're caught with a vape, they will have to submit for a drug test. Why? Because again, we just learned we don't know what's in that vape. And unfortunately, many times, they may not know what's in that vape. And from what I have understood and from what I have learned, especially with the Juuls, where it has these pods that you can continue to change and bring in, someone may have smoked that Juul that had marijuana in it over the weekend, and then they brought it to school, and they shared it with someone, and they were smoking nicotine in it, but the traces of the marijuana are now in the system. So any student who gets caught with a vape will be suspended, and they will have to submit for a drug test. With regards to drug tests, the school, the leadership understands that we need to keep our kids safe. That's our number one priority. That's why we're here. That's why I am employed at this school, to keep our kids safe. They have allowed me to find a method that is going to be much better for us to try to keep our kids safe and be able to test more kids and do a test that's a little bit stronger. We have done the urine test for many years. It has been random. The problem has been we only have a sample size of about 15 to 20 per month. In a school of 1,350 kids, we're not covering a lot of our kids, okay? So we have reached out to some of our friends, some of our neighbors, some of our Jesuit schools that we work very closely with, and we are moving towards the hair test. So as Ray said, if I start seeing a lot of bald kids on campus, we know we have a problem. Okay, I know people love Ralph, but they don't want to look like Ralph, okay? So we're going to start testing them. Thank you, Ralph. We're going to start testing the hair. Now, this is what I have learned in some of our studies. If the hair starts to get short on the head, then you take from the chest, you take from the legs. So if all of a sudden we have these pro triathletes that are coming completely shaved, we now have a bigger problem, okay? Some of the benefits, it's a more accurate test. It tests that it gives us more of a real sense of when they are doing it because it tests something that is in their system longer. Where again, from my understanding, and Ray can correct me if I'm wrong, the urine test, if you are a once in a while user, it can last in your system 15 to 20 days. If you're doing it more frequently than that, it can last up to 30 days. But the hair test will be significantly longer, okay? Our goal is to test every single high school student in the school. That's a huge change from what we've been able to do for the last few years, okay? That's an incredible investment that the school is doing in the safety of your sons. So instead of testing 100 kids, 120 kids throughout the course of a year, our goal is to test every single student in the high school, the 8th grade, and still randomly test some middle schoolers to make sure that the message is out there that we care, that we're looking out for their best interests. Another thing, someone had asked a question, I think Mr. Susana asked a question, is there a device out there that helps us detect in vaping? The answer is yes. And the school is currently in contact with a company that will have installed in the bathrooms, because obviously that is the primary area where we are concerned with. We're going to go a step further because the way it works, it's a sensor that will pick up the residue and the steam, but also the noise that comes in from people being around in a certain area. So if all of a sudden there's 5 guys that are huddled up and they're having a conversation and the volume goes up, I will be able to get a message sent to me, to Mr. Roca, to all the deans, boys' bathroom, 2nd floor, go check it out, and all of a sudden, they're going to be in for a big surprise, okay? We're masking it with some dummies, so it's not that they're going to be able to know which one works and which doesn't. So we're going to do everything we can to make sure that our boys are safe. The other thing that the administration has given me the ability to do, which again, what we want to make sure that they are aware of, is that we are snooping. So we're going to help you with the snooping. We are going to, at random and flex, go into a class and we're going to check bags. We're going to ask them, hey, bring me your bag over, we're going to check it. And if we find a vaping device, if we find anything, we'll have that conversation. Okay? We want them to take this seriously. We as a school are taking it seriously. You as parents take it seriously. The boys need to understand that this is serious and that we're looking for them. Yes, sir. So if you test positive for drugs, now the sample that we are taking, the standard panel that we are using will not test for nicotine. Okay? It will test for drugs, which will go all the way from marijuana to cocaine to amphetamines and opioids. I think that's correct, the standard panel, Ray, more or less? Okay. I think those are the ones that our standard panel has, okay? If you test positive, we bring in the student, we have the conversation with the counselor, we let them know that we have a positive test for them. Immediately, they have to reach out to Ray's office, and they are subject to counseling until he feels that they have moved on and this is no longer an issue for them. They will also sit for every other random drug test throughout the rest of the year. I know that they'll be tested over there, but we will make them submit for a drug test every other time that we are testing for the kids as well. Okay? That's for the first instance. If there's a second one, then we may have to remove them from the school. Oh, 100%. 100%. 100%. And again, there's nothing that we won't do, that doesn't include the parent involvement. But again, I want to make sure that you understand is my office works very closely with the counseling office. So that conversation will come from either the counseling office or from myself, because again, what we want to make sure that they understand is we realize that they may have a problem, they have an issue, and we are here to help and support them every which way we possibly can. But if obviously it goes to another level, if there's any form of dealing or selling, then that will be an immediate removal from the school. Is there another question? Yes. Absolutely. And what we do is we have record of those students who are on ADHD medicine, and that comes back on a separate line of the test. So when that does come back as a positive test, we compare it to what it is that we have within our nurse's office and the counseling office. If they are testing positive for an amphetamine and they are not prescribed in our notes that they have it, we'll have that conversation with the parent. If he tells, oh no, he's been put on the medicine, then you have to update your records. But otherwise, then yeah, the same process will continue. Any other questions? Yes. I'd have to look at that number. I don't know off the top of my head. I don't know. It varies depending on the panel that we use. There we go. I'll let Father Willie and everyone know. I appreciate that. Yes. So we don't announce that. When we have our tests so far, they've all been random. We will inform them what drug they tested positive for. So if they tested positive for marijuana, we will let them know you tested positive for marijuana. If they test positive for cocaine, in my year and a half here, no one tested positive for cocaine, we'll let them know. So we do let them know, but we won't tell them what we are testing for. No, we're just asking them to submit for a test. Yes. In the next couple weeks. How soon are we going to start the hair test? And the answer to that is we're going to start that within the next couple of weeks. Our goal is to initially test everybody this year. It's hard right now to figure out how long the process is going to take. We're going to test about 1,100 boys. So 1,100 boys over the next 6.5 months is doable. But again, fortunately, our principal is a math expert, so we're going to do the math together, and we're going to figure it out. But yes, the goal is to take advantage of the flex period that we have to be able to bring in maybe flex classes at a time and be able to test them there. We get it's called a non-negative or non-positive test, one of the two. It's not a positive test, a non-negative test, which means if they are clear, we get it within 24 hours. If it tests as a non-negative, then it'll go to further testing, and we'll have those results between 2 and 7 business days. Yes? You know, we've never done that. That's a conversation, obviously, I'd have with the administration. We don't want to project our issues that may exist here in our school. Again, that's something that I can't answer right now. My first inclination would be no, but it's not to say that we can't have further conversation to figure out if there's a positive reason to be able to do that. Again, I'm sure that they've had it. You know, the lab is in California. There's a lot of people who use pools in California, so it hasn't been an issue. I was a former NCAA athlete, and I got tested. I was a swimmer, so I was in the pool. Back then, the hair test really wasn't as you know, normal as it is today, but I'm sure that they have methods to go beyond the chlorine to be able to test for the right drugs. Yes, sir. The random will continue, absolutely. So we're going to always have a random population, and we're going to have a targeted population, because we don't want them to feel, oh, I got that first test in November, I'm going to go start smoking weed every single day. No, we're going to make sure that they are always on their toes, and we know that we're coming after them. Do you have a question? You know, I had a conversation with a parent recently because they were concerned that their son had been tested more than once. And it's not that I was targeting their son, it's just, number one, it was random, and he happened to be in that random pool more than once. But number two, I want these boys to talk amongst themselves as, man, I've had 2 drug tests. Man, I'm being called for my 3rd drug test, because they need to be aware that this is an ongoing process that we are going to continue to do for their benefit. Yes? Well, everyone has a fair chance, because you're not going to be asked to leave the school on your first offense. Yes, Ralph. Yes, sir. A 100%. Yes. Will we have a process in place that will address false positives? The answer is yes. Again, Ray's had a relationship with the school for over 20 years. We rely on his office tremendously. Very quickly, the first thing, if we're not sure, and I've done this with Ralph many a times, we pick up the phone and we ask for their expertise. We are not the experts. We're the experts in education. But in drugs, we have experts that we rely on to help educate us to keep your kids safe. Yes. Well, it's a combination of. So it's, again, the random process. Number one, if any student, teacher, parent brings a concern to us, we'll address that concern randomly, okay? If you're gonna come to me and you're gonna say, hey, listen, I think the Angulo's been doing a little too much of this, all of a sudden, I'm gonna be tested because you've given us kind of a heads up that you're worried about me. And we appreciate that because we do need that. We need that feedback. If you're concerned, let us know. If the students are concerned, let us know. If the counseling office is concerned, the teachers are concerned, hey, this kid's not right. He's always sleeping in my class. He's jittery. He's this, he's that. He's off. Then we act that way. And then we have the random part, right? So we're going to test our AP Calculus class the same way that we test our college prep English. It's random. We're going to make sure we pull every single person that we need to pull to make sure that we are covering them. But again, that's more so in the past because in the past we were addressing 20 kids more or less per month. Our goal is to test every single student while we keep a random testing in place that's going to cover the course of the year. And it's not to say that we're only testing them once, okay? We're going to test them once. That is the goal for sure. If we can test them twice, we're going to try to test them twice. And we're going to continue this process on because, again, we feel that this is very important for them and for us and for this institution to make sure that we are taking care of our own. Yes? So we will have a group of people that will be trained on how to collect it. We will go through a training. The nurse will be involved. We'll have another person involved who is kind of a innocent bystander to make sure that there is no question about, what's going on, to try to avoid some possible false positives. So we will sit through training, and they will teach us where it is that we need to cut, how deep, how much, how to collect, how to keep it in place, the process of storing it, signing off on it, and then it goes and it's next day aired to the lab in California. And then we get the result back in 24 hours. The problem with that is we'll never get through 1,100 students. Yeah, that's the process we're using now. We have a person come in and she collects the data. It's one person, and not only are we paying for the test, we're paying for her time service. And in order for us to really get this process started, we need to do it in a way that won't bankrupt the school either. So we want to make sure that we get it done, and he's already going to pay for all the tests, but we don't want to have him pay for the people who are going to be performing the tests. So we're going to study, and we're going to do a great job. One last question. Anybody? Again, I'm very proud of our school for putting this on. I'm very proud of the fact that we address this issue with you. Please, take the message home with you. Not the drug testing. Keep that private. Keep it to yourselves. Don't tip off the kids. Don't tip off the boys. But take the message home that Ray talked about. Take the message home that Mr. Roca talked about the importance of this, of the dangers and the lack of education that exists in our students and our boys about what's going out there. If you have questions, feel free to reach out to us. If you have concerns, feel free to reach out to us. Be parents, not friends. If you see something, say something. We can't hammer it home enough. This is a team effort. I'm very privileged and proud to be a part of this team, and I'm very thankful for all of you for coming out tonight, and we look forward to many great things with your boys over the next 4 years. Thank you very much. Drive home safely, and we'll be in touch.